I know I'm not.
Okay, we're going to start. Welcome, everybody. I feel that it's a definite, maybe because I'm preparing to give a lot of shiurim, but it feels like it's a very spiritual, like an energetic time. It feels like there's changes in the air, and a lot of things we weren't expecting to happen are happening. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not, but this whole optimism that change happens and nothing stays the same, and to always look forward. And obviously to learn lessons from whatever's going on in the current time. So now we're in Shvat. Actually, this weekend in New York is so everyone. I think a lot of people know that Chabad have a very big event for men. It's around Rosh Chodesh Kislev, so it's normally around the beginning of November. And then at this time of the year, they have what's called Chaf Bei Shvat, which is just the 22nd of Shvat. It's a date. It's the date of the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe's late wife, her Yotzat. She died in 1988. And so many Lubavitcher women go. It's not as big, but I actually went 9 years ago when it was earlier in the year, and I was able to go. It was like at the end of January. So I went over with Tanya, and we had a fantastic time. If you're interested, they have a guest program. I didn't qualify for the Shluchas program, but just the size of it. So when I was there were 3,000 women. It culminates in a banquet, and 3,000 women, Shluchim from all over the world, and their guests. And it just the size of it, and people from every part of the world, and they get different people to speak. And now, of course, it would have increased. So if I was there 9 years ago, there are now people who've had experiences in Ukraine and in remote places all over. You just feel this powerhouse of women, which we are also here. We also are a powerhouse of women who actually are making a difference in various ways. And they come together once a year. The Rebbe was very big that women should leave their families and go and strengthen each other. We have one here as well. We have it around Rosh Chodesh Elul, and it's normally alternated between Melbourne. But this one's related to the Rebbetzin. And one of the things I'll just share about this Rebbetzin is that she was known to be very, very modest. And although she lived in Crown Heights, she was her husband's biggest support, but she was not an extrovert. Whereas her mother-in-law was an extrovert. Rebbetzin Chana used to entertain and chat to people and go to the shops. And why that's important, because I was reading somewhere that it's very easy to get stuck into people. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Not freezing. I'll just put it on.
Yeah, we'll put it on, and then we can always be flexible and see how it goes. So there were a lot of stories about her, about how quiet she was, and there are a few stories about her. There's literally one photo of her. And so the problem with that is that people then think, well, I'm not like that, and therefore it means I'm not spiritual or I'm not holy. But Rebbetzin Chana wasn't like that at all. And the idea is we all have to embrace our uniqueness. She was the Rebbe's wife in her way, and we can learn from her, but it doesn't mean we have to be like her. But it is a time to reflect, and one of the things that she was really known for is the support that she gave her husband. So apparently she was very, very smart. He was very smart. I don't know if everybody knows, he was an aeronautical engineer. He studied at the Sorbonne in France. And when he moved to America, he was involved in shipbuilding and in the war effort. So he was a scientist as well, as then he became a full-time Rebbe, and he was certainly very smart, but so was she. And she would apparently read articles like medical journals and other articles, and then summarize them for him or put red marks or point things out to him. And she was very much involved in his world, but she preferred to be behind the scenes, and she did it that way. But she certainly, although she was quiet and modest, she wasn't stupid or a shrinking violet. She just lived her life in that very quiet way and was totally behind him. From my point, one of the things that she's most famous for is that there was a court case. It was resolved, I think, around 1986, because I remember that we were singing the victory song then, so it was resolved around there, but it had been going on for a number of years. And this Rebbetzin had an older sister who actually is married to a Gerari. So this Rabbi Gerari is connected with the Rebbe's family in a very connected way. I don't know how, I think it's an uncle or a cousin, but he was Rabbi Garari married the oldest daughter, but the previous Rebbe chose the younger daughter and her husband for him to be the Rebbe. And what happened was, at some point, maybe in the 70s, I don't know the dates exactly, they discovered that some very expensive manuscripts and books were stolen from the library. And this massive court case went on in America where he was saying, the nephew now of the Rebbe was saying, these are my books, they belong to my father, or they should have gone to my mother. Anyway, he tried to show it went inheritance, should have been ours. And this court case went on, and when the Rebbitzin, her name is Chaim Mushka, when she was called in, she made this famous statement, and she said to the judge, and apparently this was the turning point, the books belong to the Hasidim, my husband belongs to the Hasidim. I'm not giving it exactly right, but basically he has no personal ownership. He himself does not, he belongs to the Hasidim. His whole day and life, 24/7, 7 days a week, he never took holidays, he never took a break, he belonged to the Hasidim. And apparently that was what the judge understood. It wasn't his personal library that he was fighting for, it was passed down actually to the Hasidim, and they won the court case, and that's where the song Didan Notzach about victory came out. So that whole story was that kind of thing where she was a wife that was completely dedicated to her husband, and it's not something that I certainly couldn't relate to on a personal level, where he would come home often at midnight, come home for lunch, and then he'd be standing for hours in queues, giving out dollars, answering letters, and she would be there as his support, and apparently always waiting for him. So the guy that worked in the house, I read a story about him, he was very, very discreet. He was like her right-hand valet, butler, whatever, and of course everyone used to pump him for information about the Rebbitzin, and he didn't give it. But one thing he said was that when the Rebbe came home, she was always dressed and always waiting for him, and they would have conversation. So again, don't feel inadequate if you're not that kind of a person or a wife. However, what I don't know why I digressed onto this, but because it is Chaf Bei Shvat and we are meant to relate to the times, the idea of we don't need to be, and Esther's the same, the word Esther means hidden. There's a lot in Jewish, not that women should be retiring, but about being hidden, in the sense that often your greatness doesn't have to be shown, or every little thing you do doesn't have to be known. That a woman's, they say, beauty is within, but also that she enabled him to do whatever he needed to do, but she was definitely a full partner, and he saw her that way. So it's just interesting that they had this very solid marriage, they never had children, and there's also a famous story where a little child was crying and said, Rebbitzin, you don't have children, and she said, there was the whole shul was there, she said, look, I have hundreds of children. So they never were able to have children. But she was very much part of building whatever we have now, and to really know that whatever way you've chosen to be a wife or to be a matriarch, the solidness that we offer our homes, and the more solid we are and the more secure we are in ourselves. I think that's the thing. She was secure in doing it her way. She didn't copy her mother-in-law, who was so popular and loved and whatever. She was very her own person and did it her way, and I'm sure fulfilled her mission. So it's just amazing that, again, learning from previous generations how connected we all are to each other, and to get strength. And this is, we need to get strength from other people, because she also had a very, very hard life. All our great people had hard lives, because we all have hard lives. We live in this dream that there's a different life, but everybody has a hard life. And they had a very difficult time, because they only got married when she was 28. She was a few months older than the Rebbe because of the war. And they were then separated for a long time, and eventually the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't want to have he wanted them to have a proper wedding, so they eventually had it in Warsaw. He didn't want to have just 5 people, he wanted to have a proper wedding. So that took quite a while, which is unusual for them to get married. But then they were in France during the war, and they literally were on one of the last boats that got out of France. And they lived through the war, and they hid, and they were hungry, and a lot of things that were going on, and helping Jews all the time. There are many, many stories of Jews during the Holocaust that they helped. and then their own personal journey of coming to America. Her father, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was in a wheelchair because he'd been tortured by the Soviets, so she had lived through that. So it's not a dream life from our point of view, and then never having children in a community where people were having 8, 9, 10 children. Frauenarts are full of massive families, can you imagine? Not easy, but we get faith from that it's not about the life out there, it's how we serve Hashem with the life we've been given. And that's really, where we can get our strength, not to believe the Hollywood stories. The real people in our Jewish lives had very, very tough lives, but we admire them because of their strength. We admire them because of their dedication to doing the right thing according to Torah, even when it's hard. Not giving up and fortitude and keep. The story about how they escaped France is like a detective story. It's like a really spy story, how they finally got out, and not losing faith. This is the thing, that we just can't lose faith. And those are the stories that they did get out, and they were very fortunate in getting out. And then they built an empire that we all benefit from today. I spoke on Tu B'Shvat last week, and they were talking about the 4 parts of a tree. And so you've got the roots, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, and the fruit. And the roots is your faith. And Rabbi Ginsburg says we're an upside down tree. We're not rooted in the ground, we're rooted in Hashem. Our souls are rooted. The trunk is our growth, what we do here, our personality. And we grow like a tree. You can't actually see, after a tree is a sapling, it looks the same size, but actually every year it grows and there's a new ring. And I love this, and I thought of all my Emet ladies, that often you don't know how you've grown, or other people don't know, but every year we're growing, we have a new ring. Just like a tree, it looks the same, but actually if you cut it, you'll see it is growing. And then the leaves, I thought this was a beautiful analogy. The leaves photosynthesize. They take in the carbon dioxide and they turn it into oxygen. And he was saying that we need to photosynthesize, which means that, because man is like a tree in the field, we need to interact with the world, we need to spread out and travel and enjoy life and have relationships. But then we need to use it for the good. That's what photosynthesis, whatever our experiences are, put it back into the world in a good way. But the ultimate benefit of a tree is its fruits. And a tree gives these beautiful fruits. That's the ultimate benefit, that a fruit tree is successful when it has fruits, and when those fruits then are scattered to make new trees, to make new fruits. And I thought that's such an amazing analogy for what Chabad have done. Because if you read when the Rebbe arrived, in the 1940s, and he became Rebbe, we just celebrated the same week as Tu B'Shvat when the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1951. And I don't think there were any Chabad houses there. There was a small community in Crown Heights. So when he started sending shluchim out, people were horrified. And I remember in the 70s in Johannesburg, I was part of a different group. They were horrified. How can you send a Frum family into nowhere? There's no community, you're not going to stay Jewish. We have to protect ourselves to keep each other strong. And you must remember, there wasn't a lot of, I'm not criticizing that was the idea. And the Satmars are still like that. They live in one massive community, and they feel that's how we'll stay strong. So here the Rebbe was just sending out young people to the wild. What's going to happen to them? And there was a lot of conflict and criticism. But today we see how they are in all these scattered places, the fruits. And a Jew can be anywhere in the world, anywhere, and they have a place to go for help. And there's so many amazing stories about people who are lost in Thailand and anywhere they go to. Recently I read an Israeli had his passport stolen. Where did he go? He went to Chabad. Chabad had connections with the government, and they were able to get him home back to Israel, because otherwise no one was going to help him get a visa. When we're going to have more of that, and Chabad is established, and they always make contact, because you want to put up your public menorah, right? You have to get whoever the local MP is, Upton, to come and light it, and then when you need something, you can call it. Not that that's the reason, but you have all these connections. So you just see the fruits. They started probably before, but in 51, when he became Rebbe, the vision to actually send out that there's a place. And so what I did at the end of my Tu B'Shvat evening is I asked everybody to think about what kind of a tree you are, and to ask yourself those things. So are you deeply connected? Because if you're not deeply connected, then what happens is even if you grow without a deep connection, you're going to fall over. You need to grow in the context of holding on to your roots. And your roots can mean lots of things. It can mean your generations before, our own families, but of course Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all our forefathers and foremothers, but even again the previous rebbes, whoever's been in your life, those are your roots. We go from generation to generation. But also, of course, your spiritual roots that help you stand strong, because that's one of the things about a tree, is it can survive bad weather. It's got good roots, even fires. It gets burnt down, but it grows again. But trees have got lots of bumps and nicks and can lose branches, but it keeps standing. And that's why it says a Jew is like a tree in a field. We can withstand so much and stand resilient because our roots are in the ground. Keep growing, which is what we do. We have to keep growing, making sure that we are growing and not static. And then what are we bringing into the world? What is our contribution? Not in a fruit way, but how are we turning our life experiences into the good? And then what fruits? And it's an interesting thing because fruits can be literally your children, how you bring them up, but it's also how you influence other people, how you support various organizations. There's a concept that by supporting organizations who do something, you are part of that mitzvah. So for example, a way that I used to talk about is, let's say a person was a simple shoemaker, and he had a son who wasn't very smart, and he needed his son to work in the shoemaker factory, but he understood he wanted someone to learn Torah, so he paid towards the yeshiva. Then he got a share in the Torah learning, although he physically couldn't do it. So when you share in something, you give tzedakah to an organization, whatever mitzvahs they do, you've got a share of that. You're part of what they are actually doing. These are all fruits. So if you have money, that's where you give your fruit. If you've got time, that's where you contribute. But you're part of the bigger whole. It wouldn't happen without your contribution. So, yeah, that's why I'm feeling inspired to all this Tu B'Shvat learning and connecting. Yeah.
I think that
Sorry,
in a backhanded way, that part of what's happened in October, the sudden backlash to that, has created that idea of strengthening our roots. Because it's created in a way a strengthened community, and strengthened our sense of faith and Zionist
That's right.
beliefs.
Absolutely. But it's also part of Jewish history that the Jews go further and further away, and then something happens, and then we reconnect. Yeah.
Can I just give my commercial? It's not really commercial. It happened there.
Can you speak up?
Sorry, Melanie, what do you go after
Get
that?
rid of that noise. If the door's slightly open, for some reason the noise.
What is that noise?
I'm saying, never mind all these speakers they bring in, they literally put you there with that concept as to do the pitch.
I'm with you.
Ah.
I don't know why it works,
It's a
but
whole different.
no. So what?
What does your son run? I mean, what is your son? What big organization is it? UIA or yeah? Okay.
So my theory, which is sort of what you're saying, or a lot of, I don't know how many people are saying it, but I'm saying it. The strength that we have at this time at all times is knowledge. Who are we? And I have this feeling that a lot of people are responding to what we're all going through now. And you can watch the news and you can do this, you can do that, but if you don't know what the Yishvat's all about, how to read Hebrew, how to understand what Shabbat is, all the basic 101s, and I think there's this thirst and this desire for women people to come and learn. I'm working on this project that we're going to have a learning.
They've started this with all.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
involved in
But
it.
there are lots of things we can put it on the group. But the thing
Anyway,
is this, that absolutely people turn to the knowledge, and because it's your source of strength, is we know it to be true. And so even if you haven't learned before, when you learn something, you know it to be true. Like I was watching a little clip by Lev Schreiber, the actor, and he was saying he didn't grow up in a very Jewish home. Have you seen that little clip? And basically his grandfather had this little Seder no matter what. And of course what he remembered was exactly this. It starts off with a debate about the fingers. He said, you're arguing about fingers. Were there 5 plagues, 10 plagues? We're going to be doing this soon. But that's what stayed with him. And learning is part of our roots. As we say, the Torah, we sing that when we take out the Torah. The Torah is a tree of life. Eitz Chaim Hi. It's a tree of life. Cling on to it and then you'll be fine. So all these different things give you a lot of strength, a lot of learning. And however you relate, people learn and appreciate different things. Some people do like the history and they go with that. Some people like the Torah. And we have to respect that people learn different things. But I'll just finish with this and then we'll go on to this. There's a very famous, I think it's a Kotzker Rebbe, where someone said, I don't believe in God. And he replied, he said, I also don't believe in the God you believe in. Now, I also don't believe in the God you don't believe in. And I just heard it repeated recently. And the idea is that what people think God is, why believe in that kind of God? You need to learn, and this is what Tanya really revolutionized, how to see God. Because before that, a lot of people saw God as punitive and horrible and wars and destruction. But when you learn Hasidus and you have a completely different understanding of God and how the world runs and your soul and how it's connected, that's the God to believe in. So it's a very clever answer. When people say it, often what they don't believe in or they don't want to be Jewish, it's because they lack knowledge and they have a certain stereotype of what it is. And when they learn differently, they reconnect differently.
That's a great saying. Can you say it again? I don't believe in God.
So the guy said, I don't believe in God. He says, I also don't believe in the God you don't believe in.
You don't believe.
Yeah. Because the guy said, I don't believe in a God who's punitive. And he's going, I also don't believe in that God.
When someone says, which happened the other day, why is God punishing the Jews? Why did he make October 7? Why does children run and people hostages? What kind of God does this to us? I mean, that's an age-old question.
Correct. Yeah. And so we don't know. It's built into the fabric. But however, many, many people have actually found they've grown through it. And so a lot of people, when they've gone through suffering, there's no answer to why they suffered, and it's not the reason for it, but somehow the Jewish way has always been that we go through these very hard times, and at that point we have a choice. That's what Purim is. Purim, I'm learning about it now for my next year that I'm giving, is almost exactly the same. The Jews were comfortable. They were going to Achashverosh's feast. They said, look, we're part of the government. We're respected. You know, our treasurer's Jewish. Our attorney general's Jewish. What's going to happen to us, right? That comfort was what was going on at the time of Purim. But the high hatred was always there. So that when Haman decided he wanted to kill the Jews and he went to Achashverosh and he said, I'll pay you $1 million. Achashverosh said, please, you don't have to pay me. I'm only too happy for you to kill the Jews. They hated the Jews. So there's nothing new when you actually read, and it was the same thing. Everyone got assimilated and thought our strength and our light comes from governments, or it comes from the President of America, or it comes from money. But at the end of the day, what Hashem shows you, there's only one strength, because you can lose everything. You can. And so it's a repetition of history, and we need to learn the lessons.
What do we say to someone who believes that God is punitive?
I always agree that it does seem like that, but there are different approaches. So I'll say there is definitely, that's one approach, it's a Musar approach, but the Hasidic approach is very different, and we can look at it in a different way if you'd like to, just say that. But I don't argue with it. But it is an approach, and it does say God punishes, it does. But Hasidus talks about that a curse is really a blessing. So even like the last portion of the Torah, where all the curses, they really are blessings.
I get that, and I do believe that.
I know. When someone's upset, you can't really convince
But
them.
like sometimes you see at a funeral or something.
Yeah.
Someone will lament the person, whatever, who's passed, that was, well, bless God for giving them and having them for so long, etc. But they're looking at they're remembering the good, because when you're angry with the God or with anybody, you don't remember the other.
There's a story I remember Rabbi Shapiro told many years ago about someone who lost a son. The son was about 16. And it wasn't his story, but he repeated the story. And the guy was saying, I will never accept it, and why didn't you teach me this? And the rabbi said, I wish I could have taught you this 17 years ago. In other words, when things are fine and you learn it, like we are learning these tools. So when God forbid something big happens, we know how to think about it. We have the pain, that's what we talk about here, there's darkness, but there's a candle in the darkness. but you can't learn it in the depths of your despair. You're not open to it. So everything we're learning here, even though we only bring trivial examples, they are practicing to help us think right. So in the midst, you can't. But when things are going well, that's relatively well, that's the fruits. That's the time to try and inspire people with stories, see if you can bring them to a share, whatever you can do. But at the end of the day, when people believe that it can be, seem like that. Okay, so we're talking here about lighting candles in the darkness. And this week we're going to talk about self-discipline. So she says, maintain a disciplined life. Rebbe Yitzchak said that apathy and despair were the greatest enemies. He constantly roused his fellow prisoners to daven on time and to maintain whatever disciplines they were able to keep in these circumstances. So I don't know when Rebbe Yitzchak was. I can look it up. But when he wrote this book, it was long before CBT came about. When CBT, now if someone is depressed or lacks motivation, we teach people just get moving. Just don't lie in bed all day, just get moving. So he was talking about this. When you maintain a disciplined life, if you think about the Torah way of life, it's very disciplined. There are places to go and things to do, rather than lying in bed. So here's one of an example. In the winter, I think this is during the Holocaust, it was impossible to say the morning prayers, before going to work. Dawn simply came too late. Then the Rebbe would rise while it was still light, put on his talis, put on the tefillin shel yad on his left hand, setting the leather box firmly on his biceps and winding the strap around his arm. And the whole thing would then go hidden inside the sleeve of his kapota. When he put the tefillin shel rosh on his head as the next step, he covered that well with his visored cap. With his overcoat on to conceal his talis, he was ready to go out from roll call and there to work, which meant a walk of a few kilometers to the factory. It was either in the Holocaust or in a labor camp. So this discipline keeps you connected. Our religious rituals raise us above ourselves, binding us to something greater than ourselves, helping us to overcome the illusion of being small and isolated. That's beautiful, because you can feel very small at a time like this. So when you do a ritual, actually when I light candles, I always think of all the women before me that have lit, and all the women all over the world who are lighting. You connect it to a bigger whole, and it helps you not feel so small. This attachment to God gives us greatness, power, and dignity, even when to the outside world we may seem powerless and crushed. And it reminds me of that Washington Post thing when they said, predict what's going to happen in 50 years. And he said, the only thing I know is that on Friday at this date, women will be lighting candles. Now that's dignity. That is this. That no matter how you crush us, no matter we are bigger than it all, that's the only thing that this editor said he could predict. So even when we seem powerless, this gives us, I'm going to repeat it, greatness, power, and dignity. This tenacious determination to cling to healthy disciplines is essential when a person is in a traumatic situation. Sharansky said, prison life encourages laziness. So too does any chronically painful condition. A depressed person may not want to do the simplest task, such as brushing his teeth or doing laundry. To avoid the tendency towards lethargy and depression, Sharansky exercised his body with whatever strength he had. He kept his cell spotless, and he kept his mind agile by playing chess games with himself. A chess prodigy as a child, he spent time figuring out new moves, proving to himself that he was still sane and that they had failed to break him. When you are discouraged, think about what you can do now to contribute to the world, to your family, to yourself. And someone also who came out of the tunnels was also saying he used to walk up and down. This moving, this exercise, thinking about things. We spoke a few weeks ago about rainbows on roses. These are a few of my favorite things. Keep your mind busy. But in our general life, the important thing is to get up every day and have a productive life. Even if you don't feel like it, even if you're feeling sad, don't let that lethargy and apathy win. Connect to your greatness. Example, I have a strong tendency to depression. I'm also very lazy and can sit and mope for hours. I've learned that the only way out of my doom and gloom state is to be very tough with myself. I force myself to go jogging for half an hour every morning, despite my inner voice which is screaming, go back to bed. I force myself to pray and communicate with people. It's my muscles that overcome the defeatism of my brain. If I keep my actions and my words positive, my mood brightens eventually. And that's the other thing, to do positive actions, but also check what you're discussing. It's so easy to get depressed about what's going on. Don't go down that path. Go down the positive things that are happening. That's still happening, but we can choose. Are we going to focus on how many people died? We need to know that. But look at how many people did this, and this, showed strength, showed courage, building a vineyard, volunteering. Look at all of that, because we need to stay positive. In his book, Survival in Auschwitz, the author, Primo Levi, describes his constant battle against exhaustion, hunger, cold, and the resulting inertia. To resist enemies and have no pity for rivals, to sharpen one's wits, build up one's patience, strengthen one's willpower, or else to throttle all dignity and kill all conscience. So those are the two options. Many became muscle men before they can adapt themselves. They are beaten by time, the divine spark dead in them. So those are the people that turn on the other Jews and lose their dignity, and he says because their divine spark, they're just beaten. Levi describes a fellow prisoner, 22-year-old Alberto, who understood before any of us that this life is war. He permitted himself no indulgences. He lost no time complaining and commiserating with himself and with others. He fights for his life. He knows whom to corrupt, whom to avoid, whose compassion to arouse, whom to resist, yet he himself did not become corrupt. It's a form of EQ, really, knowing what to do, how to stay alive and live life even when all of this is going on. To be surrounded by those who are unfeeling, hateful, and cruel, and to maintain one's self-respect is an incredible feat. It takes discipline. And this is what we see all the time, right? Even the thing with the nurses. They're spewing hate, and he's going, hey, I just want peace. I just want life. And that's what we're doing. We're surrounded by a world who's saying to us, die, and we hate you, and you're terrible. And we're going, let's make peace. We want to share our technology with you. We believe in life. We maintain our dignity. So we're maintaining our self-respect, and that takes discipline. So Levi describes El, an engineer who had a survival plan. With his hands and face always perfectly clean, he had the rare self-denial to wash his shirt every fortnight without waiting for the bi-monthly change. So we have to point out that to wash a shirt meant finding soap, of which there was almost none. Needed time and space in the overcrowded washroom, adapting oneself to carefully keep watch on the wet shirt without losing attention for a moment in case it is stolen, to put it on still wet in the silence hour when the lights are turned out. El had acquired a practice, the appearance of someone prominent, considerably before becoming one. Only a long time after did I find out that he was able to earn all the show of prosperity with incredible tenacity, paying for his individual acquisitions and services with bread from his own meager ration. So this is somebody that didn't wait once a month to wash his shirt. He wanted to look prominent. He wanted to be a mensch, and he said he only found it afterwards. He'd give away his bread to find the soap to wash in the middle of the night. All the things he did because he wanted to hold on to his dignity. He took every care not to be confused with the mass. He worked with stubborn duty. He avoided the daily struggle for the best place in the queue for the ration and prepared to take the first ration, notoriously the most liquid, every dose, so as to be noticed by the bulk Ulster for his discipline. To complete the separation, he always behaved in his relations with his comrades with the maximum courtesy compatible with his egotism, which was absolute. So he made up his mind to stand up. So he had the shirt. He didn't fight for a ration. He just took the first one he was given. He had all this discipline. I believe that was really due to El that I'm alive today, not so much for his material aid as for his having constantly reminded me by his presence, by his natural and plain manner of being good, that there still existed a just world outside our own. Something and someone still pure and whole, not corrupt, not savage, extraneous to hatred and terror, outside this world of negation. Thanks to Elle, I managed not to forget that I myself was a man. And this is what I was saying to you a while ago. We need to role model with our knowledge, not in a superior way. But you have no idea. This guy wasn't doing it for anybody else. He was holding on to his sanity. He was going to have a good shirt and not grovel, and he had his idea of what gave him self-respect. But he was a role model. This other man said, I was alive because he reminded me that I was a man. It's incredible. So it's so important that we who have some knowledge to really be aware that, again, it's not our intention, but to be aware of how we behave and to draw on being brave and strong and courageous and positive for ourselves, but you never know who it's affecting as well. And that's a responsibility, because we have tools to be stronger. We'll have our weak moments, of course, but we have the tools. We need to use our tools. Talking to myself, we need to do EMET, we need to stay strong, because everybody needs it. We all need it from each other. So self-discipline is an expression of personal power. So this is what self-discipline is. Getting up and doing what we need to do even if we don't feel like it. Well, here, in Sharansky, they were all in terrible, terrible conditions, still exercise, still play chess in your mind, still do what you need to do. So we talk about this to people who are depressed, to get up every day, have a routine no matter what. Keep your routine, eat regular meals. It sounds, like silly advice for someone who's depressed, but it's not. Having a routine and having that self-discipline is much more than actually just the movement, which is a big part. But you also retain your sense of self. Lying in bed apathetic, you lose your sense of self. So it's very important. So make sure you have a routine and make sure, as I say, that what are the things that give you dignity? Don't let anyone steal that from you. Hold on to who you are and have that dignity. Okay, we'll do another candle as well. It's called learning. This is the next one. Involve yourself in learning something new. There's so much Torah. She's talking here about Torah tapes. That's how old this is. It's online. It's wherever you want to go. As I say, Rabbi Friedman says, YouTube is the biggest yeshiva in the world. And you just Google the topic and you can get it, but it's on Spotify. I'm listening now to a whole series on Spotify. There's just endless opportunities to learn and to find the people that you like. You're not stuck with the rabbi down the road if you don't like his learning. There's no excuse not to learn. Learning is one of life's greatest joys. A spark goes up when you learn something new and you go, oh, that's true, or that makes sense, or that's inspiring. It's greater than any material joy is learning. Sharansky learned Hebrew. He learned about Judaism. He read whatever his jailers would give him when reading was permissible, and he kept his mind vital by involving himself in learning something new. And of course, this is common wisdom as you get older, not that I'm saying we're getting older, but to keep your brain going, but to learn something new. But it's interesting, Sharansky, and we were speaking about Agam last time, he had no Jewish background whatsoever. He was a refusnik, but he knew nothing, but in prison. And this is what I'm saying. I'm not wishing suffering on anyone. But in prison is when he started going, I'm a Jew, I want to wear a yarmulke, I want to learn Torah. It brought out, so one of the fruits we spoke about on Tu B'Shvat is an olive. And an olive is a symbol that you've got to squeeze the olive to get the beautiful olive oil. No one wants to be squeezed. But when you are, out comes olive oil. So this is what happened. Whatever they would give him, he knew that keeping his mind active was important. Rabbi Chaim Pinchas Lubinsky, about writing about life in the, I can never pronounce it, Skorievsko slave labor camp, said, in this camp all our possessions were taken from us and we were left without a single volume of Talmud. How great was our happiness then when we found that the Rebbe of Raditschitz had one volume hidden with him. He had it stowed away in his straw mattress. Our group immediately arranged a regular learning period to study this tractate. So this is what's counterintuitive. You have people who are starving in a slave labor camp. You would think, and some did, but you would think, give up on God. Look at what you do in God, the suffering. But the opposite. So many people clung to the traditions, and this is one of the explanations, because that's who we are. we're Jewish whether we believe in God or not. It's actually not. We know what we need to do. So that someone had a Gemara and they could learn, attach them to their roots, attach them to what's bigger, made them feel greater, not small. And so it's like, logically you should give up on God, but actually, counterintuitively, we know that that's where our strength comes from. It's like the mother who takes the child for vaccination. The child is screaming, but the child hangs on to the mother because the mother's also protecting. We have to learn, again I'm talking to myself, to know that that vaccination which is sore is for our good. That Hashem, and that's what you can't tell the person who's angry, but that the pain we're going through is good. We just don't have the mental capacity, like you can't explain to a child why a vaccination is good. But in that moment, as we're having the pain, we cling on because we also know God is our Father, God is our protector. As I said, the Emunah part is working on that, it's for our good. An example, while convalescing from an operation, I decided to use my time to memorize as many chapters of Tehillim as I could manage. At first I felt terribly inadequate because I could hardly retain anything at all. But little by little I began to learn chapter after chapter by heart. What a joy this was for me in spite of the pain. I was growing. In addition to delving into the infinite world of Torah, people should also pursue their own personal interests, whether it is psychology, music, or science. So again, if we use the analogy of the tree, it's good to have roots, it's good to go into the world, but we need spiritual roots. You need to have some Torah or Jewish grounding. But, and the Rebbe was also revolutionary, because in the Frum world, until the 70s, the other groups did not encourage people to go to university or get degrees. It was very much because there was a lot of fear about people becoming secular. The Rebbe, and I knew this because I was part of it in the 70s, where more and more people were going to university, people would go and visit the Rebbe, and he encouraged people to go along their path. So for example, we when we went to London, Ontario in 1986, they had a cultural centre there with Reform, Orthodox, and I don't know, maybe the three, all together, because it's a very, very small community. It's a university town, and Les's sister lives there still, and her Les's cousin, they were both professors at the university. So we wanted to go, and it was over Shabbos, and we said, well, we need to stay somewhere for Shabbos. And she called and she said, there's this Rabbi Block. And I'll tell you who Rabbi Block is. He's since passed away. But his granddaughter is married now to Rabbi Israel's. Is he Israel? It's his wife, is a Block. Her grandfather. So we go to London, Ontario, and there are no Frum Jews there, except Rabbi Block. And how we know is Les is walking to the shul and people stopping to say welcome. They knew who he was because everybody knew we were coming into town. There wasn't anyone else in the kapota except Rabbi Block and his family. So we go to his house, and he's a professor of Greek mythology, which is why I'm telling you all of this. So he went to the Rebbe. I don't know if he was a Baal Tshuva or not, but he spoke to the Rebbe about, surely I shouldn't be teaching Greek mythology. It's not very Jewish, right? The Rebbe said, you stay in London, Ontario, and you continue teaching Greek mythology. Well, you can imagine the hundreds of people that went through his house, the students. I don't even know if there was a Chabad house on the campus. There probably is now. When he started, he was the Chabad house. And when we went for the Shabbos meal, it was packed. People like us, that was the only place for us to go. And it was a memorable Shabbos. And I was fascinated. This idea, this is the leaves idea, the photosynthesis. So he's teaching Greek mythology, but he's using it for the good. So this is what she's saying. It's great to learn Torah, and of course whatever you want, but don't think you shouldn't learn other things, but you've got to use it for the good. Those with physical illnesses should find out all they can about their bodies, holistic treatments, various nutrition and attitude. Now actually she was quite ill, Miriam Adahan, and she writes a lot about this. She used to swim every day, and she changed her diet. So she was also a little bit progressive about holistic medicine. But she says knowledge is personal power. So learning is very important, and we should learn whatever's relevant to us, physical or mental, whatever we've got, but also don't forget the infinite wisdom. And the two don't have to be separate. You use the Torah way of things to inform how you look at the secular. And that's very important. You don't use the secular to inform how you look. I'll give you an example. So when I became Frum, or when I first learned certain Torah concepts, I go, It's exactly like psychology. As if psychology was the truth, and geez, someone knew that. But actually the source, of course, of truth is the Torah, and people along the way have tapped into that, and it becomes a universal truth in a secular form. So you use the Torah way of looking at it to inform, is this correct or it's not correct? So, and it's not going to shift. The Torah way isn't going to shift. So sometimes you learn something in the secular world, and you need to actually think about, what would the Torah say about this? Can I accept this? Or is it something in that would be against Torah? And if it's against Torah, then it's not a universal truth, and you shouldn't believe it. And as we can see now what's going on in the universities and the kind of people who are teaching politics and history, doesn't mean because a university professor wrote it that it's the truth. We have, not only is the Torah a tree of life and our grounding, it's the source of truth. So if the Torah says marriage and families are good and this is how you treat people, that will always stand eternal. If psychology comes along, I'll give you, I don't know if you've had any of this experience, but I'm always horrified. You know, actually she was a frum girl in Melbourne where she went to some psychologist and he told her, you're too attached to your mother. And she actually had some developmental delays. You're not allowed to hug your mother for 3 months. I'd never ever heard this. This was only a few years ago. The trauma it caused that family. She did not want to hug her mother. So for your good, you should. That's an example. So if someone comes along with something like alienate your parents, or take revenge on somebody, or destroy a person. No, even in psychology, it's good you assert yourself. You actually have to always. That's how we look at this. What is the Torah way? And the way we learn in Emet is the Torah way of approaching it. So whatever it is, whether it's evolution, whether it's climate, there is a Torah commentary on it. Climate, looking after the environment, is not a non-Jewish idea. The first parsha, I spoke about this also on Tu B'Shvat. God gave Adam the garden, and he said, Shomer, guard the garden, look after the animals and the plants. We are meant to be guardians of this planet. We are not meant to destroy it. So it's not a Jewish thing to worry about the environment. We are meant to protect the environment. We are meant to be, you know how many laws there are about protecting animals? We are not allowed to be cruel to animals. I haven't heard anyone say it is, but what I'm saying is it's not a new thing. If you actually read the Gemara, it tells you, if you have an animal, you have to feed the animal before you eat. You're not allowed to lock it up. They're all laws on Shabbos. You're not allowed to pen animals. They're all things. You're not allowed to be cruel to animals. It's a Jewish thing. It's in the Torah, in Bereshis. So a lot of New Age things we can look at and go, yeah, I can follow that because it's absolutely true. However, when we're saying you can't do shchita, we go, no, the Torah says you can do shchita. It's easy, even if we don't know or understand. The Torah says it's a humane way of eating animals. We can do it. We are allowed to eat meat, and we elevate the meat, and there's a spiritual component. But so you always take in the Jewish approach, like brisses now. Certain countries are banning brisses.
Again?
I don't know if it's again but we believe, and we've had generations of people who've been bris by moils, and even if certain governments are saying we're not allowed and it's inhumane, we don't go along with that because that's the fad now. In fact, I don't know if this is relevant, but I had to smile, which is why I think one of the reasons, I know it probably sounds ridiculous, but why I think why Trump is loved, because he passed an executive order that plastic straws are coming back. And I heard people, yay, you've got plastic. He gets what people want, an executive order, and he said, I don't like those paper straws. And apparently now they're unhealthy because apparently when they melt with hot coffee, you're taking in some of those things. So there you go, where people banned one thing, and I'm not saying, I don't know, but it's such an interesting idea that how many people are frustrated with paper straws that he made it. So just because someone legislates it or someone said this, if the Torah doesn't say it, we can go along with it, but doesn't mean it's a truth, because you see it can be changed in an executive order like this.
And so what's interesting is that when I was in Israel after 3 months, you collect lots and lots of plastic bags, because even though they're trying to phase them out, you get plastic bags everywhere. And I thought, what's the, like for groceries and stuff, but what's the best present to bring back to people?
That's true. Anyway, so lots to think about, and yeah, we're going to be approaching. So think about this weekend. You know, as I said, it is Chaf Bei Shvat. It is a holy time in terms of the Rebbe's Yortzeit, and yeah, we need to focus on growth and doing our bit and being strong trees.
Oh, what's this weekend?